Listen up, because in 1963, Astro Boy wasn't just another cartoon. This was the first Japanese anime to air on American television, pulling over 40% market share in some US time slots, and introducing an entire generation of American kids to serialized storytelling, robot ethics, and the concept that animated characters could actually grapple with serious themes like death, discrimination, and what it means to be human. The show ran for 193 episodes in Japan and 104 dubbed episodes in America, generated millions in merchandise sales, and created the template for how anime would be imported to the West for the next 60 years. Astro Boy essentially invented modern television anime as an industry. But here's the thing. The American broadcast only lasted from 1963 to 1965, just 2 years, despite strong ratings and cultural penetration. And the production model that made it possible nearly bankrupted its creator, Osamu Tezuka, forcing him to sell episodes at a loss just to keep the show on the air. But what you probably don't know is the insane financial gamble Osamu Tezuka made that changed animation history, the production crisis that nearly killed the show multiple times, and the 3 catastrophic decisions that prevented Astro Boy from sustaining itself the way it should have. And I've got to warn you, when you see what happened behind the scenes, you're going to realize that Astro Boy succeeded artistically and culturally while failing economically, and that contradiction defines its entire legacy. So buckle up, because this is about how you invent television anime and then nearly go bankrupt doing it. How Osamu Tezuka invented an industry. Alright, so here's something most people don't realize. Before Astro Boy, weekly animated television series didn't exist in Japan at all. In the early 1960s, Japanese animation was limited to theatrical films and occasional TV specials. The idea of producing a 30-minute animated episode every single week, 52 weeks a year, was considered impossible. The costs were too high. The production timeline was too demanding. Nobody had the infrastructure. But Osamu Tezuka had a vision. Tezuka was already famous as the god of manga. He'd created the modern manga format with works like Astro Boy and Kimba the White Lion. His manga sold millions. He was the most famous comic artist in Japan. And he looked at what was happening in America. Hanna-Barbera was producing weekly animated shows like The Flintstones and Huckleberry Hound, using limited animation techniques. They'd figured out how to make television animation economically viable through cost-cutting and efficiency. Tezuka thought, if Americans can do this with their characters, why can't Japan do it with ours? In 1961, he founded Mushi Production specifically to create Japan's first animated television series. He chose Astro Boy, his most popular manga property, as the flagship show, and he made a decision that would nearly destroy him financially, but would change the industry forever. He drastically underbid the actual production costs to get the show on Japanese television. The real cost to produce each episode of Astro Boy was approximately 2.5 million yen. Tezuka sold broadcast rights to Fuji TV for only 550,000 yen per episode. He was taking a loss of nearly 2 million yen per episode, roughly 80% of production costs, just to get the show on the air. Why would he do this? Because he was betting on merchandising revenue to make up the difference, and because he was essentially subsidizing the creation of an entire industry. To make this financially insane model work, Tezuka had to invent Japanese limited animation techniques. He studied Hanna-Barbera's methods and adapted them. Static backgrounds, mouth-only movement while characters talk, repeated animation cycles, banking common movements for reuse. But he also maintained higher quality than typical American limited animation. More detailed character art, more expressive faces, more cinematic compositions. Astro Boy looked better than the Flintstones or Huckleberry Hound, despite costing less per episode. Astro Boy premiered on Fuji TV in Japan on January 1st, 1963, New Year's Day, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The show became a cultural phenomenon in Japan virtually overnight. Ratings hit 40% market share, meaning 40% of all televisions in Japan that were on were watching Astro Boy. Merchandise exploded. Toys, books, clothing, everything. Within months, the merchandising revenue started justifying Tezuka's insane financial gamble. And then NBC came calling. NBC had been watching the success in Japan and saw an opportunity. Japanese animation was cheap to license compared to producing original American content. Astro Boy was already completed and successful. Why not try it in America? In September 1963, just 8 months after the Japanese premiere, NBC began airing dubbed episodes of Astro Boy in syndication across the United States. And American kids responded just like Japanese kids had. The show was different from anything on American television. It had ongoing storylines. It dealt with serious themes: robots being discriminated against, scientific ethics, the nature of consciousness. Characters died and stayed dead. Astro Boy himself grappled with being created to replace a dead human child and whether that made him real or just a copy. American cartoons in 1963 were mostly slapstick comedy. Astro Boy was asking philosophical questions while also delivering exciting robot battles and science fiction adventure. By early 1964, Astro Boy was airing on over 50 American stations and pulling strong ratings in most markets. NBC was pleased. Merchandising partners were signing up. Everything looked successful. But underneath the apparent success, Astro Boy was still bleeding money. And the production model that made it possible was unsustainable. Mistake number 1. The production model was financial suicide. Here's the brutal reality that nearly killed Mushi Production. You cannot produce animation at 80% loss per episode and expect to survive. Tezuka's bet on merchandising revenue was working, but not well enough. The toy deals, the licensing agreements, the international sales, all of it combined still wasn't fully covering the production losses. By mid-1964, Mushi Production was in serious financial trouble. They were producing 1 episode per week, 52 per year, and losing money on every single one. The company was essentially burning through capital trying to keep Astro Boy on the air. Tezuka was using profits from his manga work to subsidize the animation studio. He was borrowing money. He was delaying payments to staff and contractors. The whole operation was held together by Tezuka's sheer force of will and his willingness to personally go broke to keep it alive. And here's the thing that makes this even more insane. Tezuka's financial model became the industry standard. Other Japanese animation studios looked at Astro Boy's success and thought, we can do that too. They started their own shows, selling broadcast rights at below production cost, betting on merchandising to make up the difference. This created the economic structure that defines the anime industry to this day. Productions that lose money on the actual animation, relying on secondary markets to become profitable. It's why anime studios are notoriously unprofitable, while the properties themselves can be worth billions in merchandise and licensing. Tezuka accidentally created an industry built on unsustainable economics, and Astro Boy was the proof of concept that this broken model could produce culturally significant work even while financially destroying its creators. By 1965, Mushi Production was on the verge of bankruptcy. Astro Boy was still successful, still pulling good ratings in Japan and America, still selling merchandise. But the company making it was dying. Something had to give. Mistake number 2. The American broadcast strategy was short-sighted. Here's where NBC killed Astro Boy's American longevity. They treated it as cheap, disposable content, not as a franchise to build. NBC syndicated Astro Boy, which meant they sold it to local stations rather than broadcasting it nationally on the NBC network. Different stations aired it at different times, in different formats, with different levels of promotion. This syndication model maximized short-term revenue. NBC could sell the show to multiple markets simultaneously, but it meant there was no consistent national presence, no unified marketing, no brand building. Compare that to how network shows were treated. The Flintstones aired in primetime on ABC at the same time nationwide. Everyone knew when it was on. The network promoted it heavily. It became an event. Astro Boy was scattered across 50-plus markets with no coordination. Some stations aired it after school, some on Saturday mornings, some in primetime. Kids in New York might see different episodes than kids in Los Angeles because stations selected which dubbed episodes to air in what order. And NBC only commissioned 104 episodes to be dubbed out of the 193 episodes that existed in Japan. They didn't even adapt the full series. When those 104 episodes ran through syndication cycles, that was it. No new content, no continuation. NBC could have committed to dubbing all 193 episodes. They could have moved it to network Saturday morning once it proved successful. They could have built it into an American franchise. Instead, they milked it for cheap syndication revenue and moved on. By 1965, many American stations had cycled through the 104 available episodes multiple times and were dropping the show for newer content. Astro Boy faded from American television not because it failed, but because NBC never gave it the support to sustain. The show that introduced anime to America was abandoned by the network that brought it over. Mistake number 3. Tezuka couldn't say no to new projects. This is the decision that spread Mushi production too thin and accelerated its financial collapse. Tezuka kept starting new anime series before Astro Boy was financially stable. Even while Astro Boy was bleeding money, Tezuka greenlit Kimba the White Lion in 1965. Then Goku's Great Adventure in 1967. Then more and more projects, each one produced at the same financially ruinous below-cost model. Why? Because Tezuka was an artist first and a businessman never. He wanted to create. He wanted to animate all his manga properties. He wanted to build the Japanese animation industry, even if it bankrupted him personally. Each new show meant more staff to pay, more production costs to cover, more financial bleeding. Mushi production was expanding rapidly while hemorrhaging money on every project. And Tezuka couldn't fix the core economic problem because he'd set the industry pricing standard. Once he'd sold Astro Boy broadcast rights for 550,000 yen per episode, other studios matched that price. Networks expected anime to cost that little. Raising prices would mean losing deals to competitors. Tezuka had inadvertently created a race to the bottom in anime production economics, and he couldn't escape it even as it destroyed his company. By the late 1960s, Mushi production was in constant financial crisis. Staff went unpaid for months. Projects were canceled mid-production. The studio that had created the anime industry was collapsing under the weight of its own success. In 1973, Mushi production went bankrupt. The company that made Astro Boy, that invented weekly television anime, that changed animation history, it failed financially and shut down. Osamu Tezuka had to start over from scratch with a new studio. Astro Boy had made him culturally immortal and financially broke. Success and failure simultaneously. Here's what makes Astro Boy's story so weird. By every artistic and cultural metric, it was a massive success. By every financial metric, it was a disaster. In Japan, Astro Boy created an industry. Every anime series that followed built on the production techniques and economic models Tezuka pioneered. The entire anime industry, now worth billions globally, exists because Astro Boy proved it was possible. In America, Astro Boy opened the door for every anime import that followed. Without Astro Boy's success in 1963, Speed Racer doesn't get imported in 1967. Battle of the Planets doesn't happen in 1978. The entire pathway for anime coming to America was carved by Astro Boy. The cultural impact is undeniable and permanent. Astro Boy changed both Japanese and American animation forever. But financially, Tezuka nearly destroyed himself creating it. Mushi production went bankrupt. The economic model Astro Boy established continues to plague the anime industry today. Studios producing at a loss, hoping merchandising saves them, often failing. Astro Boy succeeded at changing the world and failed at sustaining the people who made it. That's a brutal contradiction. When artistic vision requires financial martyrdom. So here's the thing about Astro Boy. It only exists because Osamu Tezuka was willing to sacrifice financial stability for artistic vision. No rational business person would have done what Tezuka did, selling episodes at 80% loss, betting the entire company on merchandising revenue that might never materialize, using personal manga profits to subsidize a money-losing animation studio. It's financial insanity, but it's also how industries get created. Someone has to be willing to lose money to prove something is possible. Someone has to subsidize the initial infrastructure before the economic models can mature. Tezuka created the anime industry through sheer stubborn refusal to let economic reality stop him. He took losses that would have bankrupted anyone else. He kept going when every rational analysis said to quit. And it worked. Not for him financially. Mushi production failed. But for the industry, for the art form, for the culture, Astro Boy changed everything. The lesson isn't be financially irresponsible. The lesson is that sometimes creating something genuinely new requires someone to bear costs that don't make sense in the moment, but create value that lasts forever. Tezuka didn't get rich from Astro Boy, but he created an industry that generates billions. He didn't build a sustainable company, but he built a cultural legacy that will outlive us all. That's not failure. That's martyrdom for a vision. So that's the rise and fall of Astro Boy, the show that invented television anime, that introduced Japanese animation to America, that changed animation history in 2 countries simultaneously, and that nearly bankrupted its creator in the process. If you remember watching Astro Boy in the 60s and being confused why a robot was more emotionally complex than most humans, you're my people. Drop a comment and tell me if you understood what you were watching or just thought it was a cool robot show. I bet most of you were just there for the robot fights. And if you're not subscribed yet, there's a lot more animation history where this came from.